Hi, my name is Dana Gonzales. You're listening to the CinePod, the Cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
All right, Ben, I know that there was some urgency you wanted to talk about, immediately dive into our close focus. But before we do that, we should mention that the incredibly talented Dana Gonzales is on the show.
Holy crap.
And Dana is going to have to wait for just a minute because I know you got some stuff you got to get off your chest. So take us into the close focus today, Ben. What's going on?
All right. Well, as we're recording this, the Oscars concluded, I don't know, maybe an hour ago. All I want to say about the Oscars is what the fuck with the Oscars? What happened? It looked like it was like a found footage film. It looked like they hired a bunch of public access channel interns to film it on their phones. What was going on? Do you have any insight as to why the Oscars looked like worse than they have looked since the advent of video?
I got one insight, but I'm going to have to Gene Siskel to your Roger Ebert here. I actually really liked the way the Oscars looked. And
what?
Yes, there are some moments in particular which are shaky cam. And I got the feeling that there's a lot of handheld in it. But I'm
okay with handheld. They do handheld at the regular Oscars, I think, all the time. But it was like the lighting was weird, and it looked like the cameras were set at the wrong frame rate or the wrong shutter speed or something. Like everything looked super weird about the Oscars.
Yeah. How did you watch it? Did you watch it via broadcast?
Yes, ABC via cable.
Okay. I watched it via terrestrial antenna, and there was some definite compression going on, but for the most part, I actually thought it looked pretty good, and I didn't really have a problem with the cadence at all. That was not something I saw it was an issue. I'm wondering if it was more on the cable operator end that came to you, possibly. I don't know.
I mean, it might be possible, but and look, I understand, and as anyone who's listened to me for the last year and change will know, I have all the sympathy in the world for COVID-19, and I think all kinds of COVID-19 safety protocols need to be maintained. But I honestly had a really hard time even watching the Oscars.
Wow, okay.
They went to a shot where obviously I was very excited about watching the Cinematography award, and congratulations to friend of the show Eric Messerschmidt, or as they said on the show, Eric Messenger Schmidt.
Yeah, in the after party, they pull Eric aside too, and he's sitting down there, and the question to him is, what was the first thing that goes through your head when they called your name? And he was extremely diplomatic and gave an answer, but my answer in my living room was, you said my name wrong.
Yeah,
Halle Berry, you said my name wrong. So.
But it's like, so that shot of Halle Berry, it looked like we were standing, 15 feet away from her, about 5 or 6 feet below her eye line, looking up at one of the most beautiful human beings on earth. And there wasn't at first even enough light on her face. And I'm like, hey, what if we lit the movie star? What if we pointed a light at the movie star before we pointed the camera at her?
I gotta agree with you. There's quite a few spots where I think they wanted it to feel maybe more immediate, less stodgy. And so they're doing these awards sort of conversations from the middle of the floor. And because it wasn't so set up, and because it wasn't so lit, and it wasn't so broadcast with a broadcast team, I'm sure, a couple times I noticed that a lot of things were out of focus, and it didn't seem like the camera was that far away. So I'm guessing they used larger format cameras. I think I saw an Amira once or twice during this. So I think they were really trying for a different look and trying for a different vibe. And overall, I actually think they succeeded. Overall, I really liked the awards.
Man.
But there are many times.
I do not agree at all. Oh God, I don't agree.
There are many times where, yes, it doesn't have the look that you expect from the Oscars. It doesn't have necessarily all the spit and polish. It is a COVID pandemic year, but that is a huge cavernous room too. And to my understanding is it was a historic room. So that whole set that they built that everyone was on, I imagine that's going to have been carefully built and reinforced, because they can't damage or bolt anything in there. I think that place in Union Station has been around forever. And I think that every time movies come through there, they have to be extremely careful of the light fixtures in the ceiling and everything else. It's like, I don't know how much they could bring in. I actually thought those little things on the tables at first were like little extras for like fill lights until I saw the other side of them, and so I was like, oh, there's no light.
By the way,
coming out of that.
you mentioned the tables.
Yeah.
And like on the tables, people just had their stuff. Like there's your purse and your phone and your drink on the table. And I mean, like it didn't have the pop of a look of something like, the Comedy Central roast of Charlie Sheen. It didn't have that zazz to it. And it felt completely informal and just messy.
Isn't Steven Soderbergh involved in these Academy Awards? Didn't he have some influence? Wasn't he like the director for the Academy Awards or the overall architect? I had heard.
Did he have them? Did he have everybody shooting them on iPhone 7s or something? Like what was going on there? Let's see.
Oscars 2021, co-produced by Steven Soderbergh. So yeah, and I got to say that there's moments that I quite enjoyed, like when Lee Isaac Chung, he's getting his name read, and because of the camera angle, you actually get to see like his wife reach under the table and hold his hand. It's like that was like a really sweet, tender thing that you don't usually see in the big Oscar telecast when they're all packed into the Kodak Theater and it's rows and rows of seats. I thought that despite some technical issues and definitely there was a couple of iris or exposure changes or things that happened, and it was kind of a wacky awards, but I got to say that I loved every minute of it, and I thought that Questlove was great, and I thought that I really appreciated sort of what I think was trying to happen there. I will tell you the thing that didn't work for me, which I think was possibly the biggest problem, was moving Best Picture before the Best Leading Actor category. So Best
Well, you know why
Picture
that was?
No.
This is my understanding, is they put Best Actor last because they suspected Chadwick Boseman was going to win Best Actor.
Yes, and I think that would have brought down the house. I think it would have been like incredibly effective had that happened. But do you know this to be true, or is this a theory? Because we had the same thought in conversation in my living room watching this. Do you know that for a fact that's why
I don't know that for a fact. That was what I had heard. But, and like, look, Sir Anthony Hopkins, one of the finest actors who's ever lived, one of my favorite actors, just an amazing performer. I feel like of all years, this is the year that they can't point to Oscars so white. Like, so many people of color won awards. But at the same time, it probably would have been amazing for Chadwick Boseman to win posthumously. And you sort of expect it after, when someone's life is cut after short like that.
And all these other award shows, too, where all these other awards that have been bestowing honors to him. It felt like the gimme. It really felt like a gimme.
Definitely shades of Heath Ledger. Yeah. I expected it. I was actually like, when I looked at who was nominated for Best Actor, I assumed that he would get it. Just, the posthumous thing, like, puts it over the top, and he's such a beloved actor and cut off so young.
I love The Father. The Father's great.
I'm not going to argue with Anthony Hopkins winning any award. He deserves all the awards. But anyway, I had heard that was the expectation, so they'd put Best Actor last, which
wow.
I mean,
so that's why it just feels like such an off note. And two, you have Frances McDormand doing a wolf howl like moments before when she is up there. It's like it was a really sort of like jarring, just sort of like drop off ending. And Anthony Hopkins is not even here. And good night. So
yeah.
It was, yeah.
Super, super, super weird. I'm going to say, if not the worst Oscars, definitely the weirdest. And it's hard to beat the year that La La Land won and then didn't win, and then Moonlight won.
All right, I might be in the minority here. I haven't talked to anyone else about it. This award show just ended, but I really enjoyed it. I liked how different it was, and I liked how refreshed it felt, and I liked how it didn't take itself too seriously during the pandemic. I thought that was great. And Glenn Close effing killed it. She effing killed her bit.
She always does. All the people up there are total pros and amazing. It was just the presentation of it, the stage management of it, the lighting of it, the cinematography of it really bummed me out. It made it hard for me. And also the sound, and I understand it's harder to control sound there, but the sound was distractingly bad.
Just remember that the same guy who made Schizopolis was the co-producer of the Academy Awards. So there you go.
He also made many movies that I love. Anyway, but I definitely want to say a huge congratulations.
Steven Soderbergh crossing us off his show to go on list right now. So.
What do you mean? I love so many of his movies.
But he said so many of his other films. So to make it sound like you.
I'm not the world's biggest fan of Schizopolis, but whatever. I think that I could definitely have a conversation with Soderbergh that would go on for hours and hours and hours about all of his work that I think is amazing, including some movies that maybe are a little bit more obscure, like The Limey. Anyway.
Moving
I
on.
definitely want to extend a humongous congratulations to Eric Messerschmidt. And I remember when we were interviewing him, I said something to him, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I think I said I would be shocked if his work was not nominated for Best Cinematography. And he's an extraordinarily humble guy and very, very down to earth. And he kind of, on the Zoom, I think he kind of gave me a look of like, really? Like, kind of wasn't expecting it. So I was very excited to see Eric Messerschmidt win.
And I know you didn't bring it up. You're far too humble yourself here to bring this up. But didn't you also pick Mank to win in our episode just a few days ago with Janelle Riley?
I did. And I actually felt like it was kind of a dark horse, although I had my reasons why I thought it might win Best Cinematography. But, chief among them is it looks frickin' amazing. Not that the other nominees all don't look great, but I felt like Mank had a couple of things going for it. One, the Academy is a sucker for great black and white. Two, I didn't think it was going to win Best Picture, but it's a movie about the film industry, which the industry always loves. And so often when a movie is like beloved by the industry, but the winds aren't blowing in the direction of Best Picture, it'll win a different award like Best Actor or not usually Best Director and not Best Picture, but Best Cinematography is an award that it might get. And I feel like Fincher's work in Hollywood is just, so profound and so deep and has been going on for so long that it would be weird for a movie like this to not win something. But above and beyond everything, I just thought it looked amazing. Like I thought that the look of that movie was so captivating and brilliant, and I was excited as hell to interview Eric Messerschmidt. And I'm glad he won, and I'm sorry that his name got mispronounced. Again, that's something that I don't blame on Halle Berry. That's stage management. Like that all should have been rehearsed. Like everybody should have known how to pronounce everything. Everyone should have known all their marks.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. And I definitely got the feeling that Halle Berry was seeing those names for the first time just then at that moment.
Everybody looked like they were seeing their names for the first time. So, I mean, to me, it I don't know. I'm going to leave it at that. I hope I'm not making anyone mad who produces the Oscars. If somebody would like to come on our show and explain to me why I'm wrong, I'd love to hear from them, including Steven Soderbergh. You can come on here and personally tell me that I'm an idiot. I'm good. But I just had an impossible time with that. I thought, congratulations to everybody who won, and I think they all deserved a better show.
Wow. Okay. I still quite liked it. Anyway, so hey, it's time to get to the interview with Dana Gonzales. Of course, Ben, remind our listeners about some of the work that Dana Gonzales is doing right now, some of the incredible stuff.
Dana Gonzales has like an amazing filmography of a lot of television, a lot of great television, most recently shooting and directing the majority of the Fargo TV series, which if you haven't seen it, get on that. That show is amazing and beautiful and captures the tone of the original Coen Brothers movie so perfectly and then builds on it. He also shot Greenland, the movie giant action movie that came out this year. But yeah, that's some of his work, but he's, Longmire, he's got an amazing career.
All right, so let's get to the interview with Dana Gonzales.
The Cinematography Podcast interview.
All right, so we are here today with DP and director Dana Gonzales. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Dana.
Yeah, it's really, really great. You guys have had such great past guests, and that interests me. And so I'm interested to see what you guys get out of me.
Oh, can't wait. And Ilya just reminded us, you were requested specifically by a fan. Like we were asked to reach out to you. So, or I shouldn't say a fan, a listener. I don't know that we have fans. Do we have fans, Ilya?
We got some hardcore fans out there. And yeah, I will say that we get requests fairly on the regular. And I will say, though, that Dana's request was impassioned. They'd written like a very long email to us about how they thought that he would be perfect for the show. And so I'm really excited that now we get to be in wish fulfillment mode. We get to see, how it goes. It'll be great.
So, your work is amazing, and some of your more recent work is stuff like Greenland and Fargo and Legion. You've just done some really gorgeous stuff. But I kind of want to start by sort of with my generic opener, which is, what's your process? You're handed a script. How do you start the process of trying to figure out and break it down and turn it into whatever pictures you're going to make out of it?
Yeah, I work in a very fortunate situation where the last 7 seasons of television were all unique. And Fargo, every year is a different story, a different set of characters, different look. Legion, every year every season was a different world. So a lot of world building going on. So the good thing is that at the beginning of every one of these seasons, I basically have to come up with a look and kind of aesthetic process that the show will be that season. And that's kind of how it always starts. So it's unlike doing season 2 of a show that just has a theme, the same kind of character arc or something like that, or episode 18 of a 26 episode season where you're,
not to be confused with chapter 18 of Legion, which is, one of your fan favorites.
Yeah. Well, Legion, even though they were consecutive chapters, that was over 3 seasons and 3 different worlds, like 3 completely different worlds that took place in. And every season, the aesthetics changed. They just did. There was always a different approach to it, meaning, if there was different lenses used or a different maybe lighting presentation, all the sets were different. So that always kind of informs new aesthetics and new lighting, and then like Fargo being completely new characters. And, Fargo is a show that evolved from season 1 where we're paying really close homage to the movie. Then we started earning our right to change things a little bit and add a little bit and get a little bit away from maybe the exact Fargo style storytelling, where season 4 is kind of like, we just kind of said, you know what, we're going to do whatever we want to do. And we changed the way we lensed it. We're always flexing our muscles a little bit and bringing in new ways to tell the story. And season 4 being the oldest period, 1950s in Chicago, it was supposed to be 1950s Kansas, and how to really pull that off and put the audience in that space. And for me, I guess to go back to the original question you have, I'm always interested in putting the audience in a certain emotional place. Like it's very important to me. And sometimes that's color of light. Sometimes that's in objective camera. Sometimes that's in the way the camera's moving. I mean, I don't know if you saw Pieces of a Woman. Have you seen that film yet?
I have not seen that one.
Okay, that like Benjamin Loeb, who shot it, did an incredible job with this. The camera it's kind of moving the whole time. Like the first 20-something minutes is this one big single shot, but it really works. And then the whole movie kind of has this thing going with it that really helps and changes the mood, stabilizes, eradicates the mood. And that interests me. So like when I don't know how others read a script. When I read a script, I always see visuals every single time. And sometimes I see visuals and story points that aren't even there. So sometimes I'll read a script.
Oh, interesting.
And then I'll say later, oh, didn't this happen? And they're like, no, that didn't happen. But I'm like, somehow to me, it was like, of course it happened because that's the way it should be or something like that. So what that does to me.
Which explains your move into directing.
Yeah, well, definitely with directing, now I could really implement some of those thought processes a little bit better. But, even as a DP, and especially on the shows I work on, and most directors that I worked with came in knowing that I carried a lot of the creative flow forward. I carry the look and tone of the show forward, and I maintain it. They relied on me. So like if I did bring up something like that, they would probably listen to me about it. But I always read the script and sometimes I see the possibilities. And that's the thing that now I'm convincing people of the possibilities. Because maybe even we could read something in a script and of course we have to fit it into a budget. We have to fit it into a timetable, right? So for instance, Fargo season 4, episode 9, I think it is now, the black and white, there's a tornado. I don't know if you've seen that episode. Well, when you read that you're doing a tornado sequence for a TV show and it's a little bit like The Wizard of Oz, how do you do that? You don't just throw it all into a visual effects world and say, oh, you deal with it. We'll just shoot this against a green screen.
That was going to be my question. It'd be like, yeah, you let the nerds handle it.
Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, I definitely seen some people just do that. But for me, again, there's a audience experience that's about to happen. And there's a lead up to the main event. There's an aftermath of this affected event. And all that needs to work together. I mean, the whole episode up to that climatic ending, it all has to seamlessly work together. And you have to build it. And, and you have to be conscious of every single shot and every single frame leading up to that. TV is a very insidious formula because every day on television could potentially be a huge amount of real-time storytelling. So if you have like a day where you just phone it in, or 2 days where you just phone it in, or you compromise 2/3 of the day, that sometimes is 7 minutes of screen time. Well, 7 minutes of screen time for today's viewer is a lot. In 7 minutes, there's a lot of things that they want from them, and it could be as like the last 7 minutes were as slow as molasses. You know what I mean? They literally, like, people today, when they see a beginning of a movie or an episode, in 7 minutes, like, you have to gone somewhere. Like, if in 7 minutes you were just sitting there on the bed reading a letter, they would turn it off.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, like, when I look at the shows that you're shooting, Fargo and Legion and stuff, like, these are not phone it in kind of shows, and they're the visual construction of them is on par with anything you'd see in a movie theater. Really, like, you're obviously, you probably have way less time to shoot all that stuff, but that doesn't mean that the thought behind it isn't just as constructed. It doesn't feel like you just said, okay, wide shot, close up, hose it down, boys, and move on. Everything feels like it's got a real purpose. And that, to me, is one of the marks of modern television in general, but like what makes today's television so great.
Yeah, no, listen, I mean, it's daunting. I mean, we all have different days. Some people have 7 days to an episode. Some have 8, some have 14, some reshoot, some, all these things. I can tell you that, you really need a strong leader from the top, being the showrunner and producers. I mean, if they're on board for greatness, and now you put a cinematographer and team with that same mission, you're going to get greatness. If the cinematographer wants to do a lot and the producers don't, you're going to struggle. And that, I'd say that's more the norm. And you do have DPs out there just fighting for, to get everything on the screen. And I mean, even in episodic, it's, you have directors coming in sometimes that just want to kind of get it done. And, you were like, no, we're going to make this great because that's what we do. You're always up against it. So again, I'm in a very fortunate situation with the people I work with, which makes it hard for me to take other jobs because, everybody talks about that's what they want for their project. But when you really get into it and you start dealing with money and time, everybody kind of has their views about that. First ADs have their views about how much something's going to take. Line producers are worried about money. And for me, it's like, I like the challenges. I like the challenges of the unknown. I like to be uncomfortable. And if you talk to anybody that works with me, especially like camera operators and everything, I like when they're uncomfortable. I'm not meaning that I'm yelling at them and whatever, but I mean doing things that they've never done.
Yeah.
And like you in the film business, you hear a lot. It's like, oh, this is how we do it. Or, do you want me to do this? Because that's like the next progressive thing to do. Well, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the unknown. I'm interested in failing. I'm really interested in failing. Because again, we talked about it a little bit before the show started, but everybody that is at least on my level, I assume they're all technically proficient. And so, we all can make a great image. So now, like, how do we make a great image that challenges ourselves and gives the audience a new feeling? I mean, to me, like, I think that today with today's television and today's in all media, if you can make an audience member feel differently than they've ever felt before, that's amazing. And I think, like, if we think about the images or the moments in cinema that we can all talk about, it's always a feeling. It really is. Sometimes it's dialogue based, but it's always a feeling. It's always how it made you feel, and that's why you remember it. Maybe it was funny, maybe it was sad, maybe it was just thought provoking, and it just stuck in your gut. Well, that doesn't just happen because of one thing. That doesn't happen just because of the great writing. I mean, great writing is a huge part of it, but it's also how you capture that and how you execute it. And a lot of times they're steeped in originality. And I think that TV in 20 years ago was never known for its big artistic leaps and bounds. Today, the tables have turned. I mean, TV is like leading the way in probably artistic, creative expression for artists. And that's why you have huge actors and directors and all kinds of other filmmakers getting involved in it, because you're able to tell, let's say, a 10 episode, you're able to tell a 10-hour story and really flesh out characters. And then you have all these just incredible visuals that people are creating, that people are responding to. You know, the Queen's Gambit, you know, people are responding to the way they made that show, and what Stephen Meisler did, and Mindhunter, and these are just like, like all these shows now, the visual component is as important as the writing and the lead actor. I mean, it all goes hand in hand, but it's like if Mindhunter had 25-year-old television quality, I don't think people would be talking about it. It's like the visuals give it this incredible foundation to hold it up and really make you be able to listen and see the scenes and feel a certain way. And it's just like this incredibly strong foundation. And that's been exciting. And I started basically doing features I was a camera assistant for many, many years, a focus puller. And I did mostly features in those days. And I always thought that I was just going to transition to features, you know, as a DP. And so my first jobs were features. And then I just kind of didn't really want to get involved in television. And somehow about 2009, I kind of started doing television and thought I was just going to do a pilot or two and in and out. And then the landscape changed. The way we could tell stories changed, and then the writing changed, and the way that the audience responded to what was happening changed. And then I met Noah Hawley, and, you know, a person that just kind of pushes for creative expression, and found my home. Mm-hmm. I try things all the time that if they don't work, we can always reshoot it, I guess.
I was going to ask you about that, because when you do high-risk stuff that you haven't done before, sometimes it's just not going to work out.
I did a scene on Legion that it was supposed to be in Platonomy's, one of the characters' mind space, right? It was like, and this show was already like you were in any one episode, you were in 5 different worlds. You were in Memories of Memories, or...
I know, it's so bonkers.
Right.
I can't imagine looking at the script and understanding how it was going to turn out the way that it did.
It was crazy.
It's insane.
The tone meetings and concept meetings of that show I'll probably never be in a situation like that ever again.
I mean, it was inspired by Bill Sienkiewicz, the comic book guy who wrote really way out comic books, like Stray Toasters and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, we were we had a visual effects world, but we were trying to be more practical. So on one particular scene, I stacked low-con filters. I use a lot of filtration. And I use like a low-con 7 and like a low-con 8 or something. Like I don't even know where you get those kind of filters, because I wanted it to have this ethereal feeling. And I know most people say you could do that in post. No, you can't. You can't fuck up an image like we can in front of a camera in post. You can't. I figure if they made a low-con 8 and a low-con 7, they were meant to be used, right? And today people, talk about filtration sometimes, and they'll say, I use a quarter pro mist. Like, I don't use a quarter anything. To me, it's to me,
go big or go home.
No, it starts at 2. It's just because that's to me where like things start getting affected, and I think like even taking filters out of the equation, that's the kind of painter's stroke that I want to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to leave that up to post-production or visual effects, because that's where you're going to get really disappointed. Because even if the visual effects supervisor supports you 100%, once they get into the editing room, once they get into a time crunch, once they get into episode 9 of a 10-episode series, they're running out of money. So if I forced my visual down their throat, then that's what they have to use. Now maybe that's not for everybody, but I think anybody could take a risk. I think, again, it's a calculated risk. I think people have been doing that. I think people used to do that more in film, like I said, because they had to. And now, in the digital world now, where it's just because also people are watching things on the screen instantly, like, you have producers and everybody's kind of people can chime in, I suppose. That's where it gets crazy. I did the show. It was like my first I did the pilot for it, and then I shot the first season and a half of it. It's called Pretty Little Liars. How I got the job was I said, beautiful people in dark places. Because it was literally about like these 4 good-looking girls and even the parents and everybody, they were like all good-looking actors. And I knew that's the way it was going to be. It was like 90210 in darkness. And at that time, no one was doing that.
Yeah. That's cool.
And that was my pitch, right? And if they didn't do it, they didn't do it. And I didn't do it. That's fine. But we did it. So that was another show where, believe it or not, I got to really express myself. And I did constantly. And the first season, I'm sure you have some viewers that watched it. The first season was a breakthrough. It transformed ABC Family, that Freeform. It's called Freeform now. It literally transformed their entire network. So there was this one scene, and it was a memory. It was like a flashback memory thing. And I thought about it all weekend, and I came in and I didn't ask anybody. I didn't tell them. I just said, this is what I'm going to do. I brought all these view cameras, medium format view camera where you have you look through the glass.
You look straight down.
I had a Rolleiflex. I had like a Mamiya, and I set them all up, and I had 3 cameras, and I shot the entire scene through these cameras. So I basically, and I did 13, 14 shots. There wasn't just one shot. It was an entire scene. And I just told the director, this is what I'm going to do. And they're like looking at me. And I had, at that moment of that show, I had a huge amount of creative license because I'd already proven to myself. One of the strongest elements of the show was the visuals. So they let me do it. And I think it turned out incredible. It's in the show. We got a comment from a letter a couple days later from the studio, and they said, just don't do that again. and the funny thing is, I would do it again. And today, if we had this scene right now, it would be people would be like, what? It's great. Because, this was 2009. There's a big difference between 2009 television and 2020 television.
For sure.
But to me, that was like, I wanted it to feel that way. I knew it's going to create an image, right? I'm going to be focusing on those screens that are actually focused on the image. And look, it's going to turn out to be something, and I think it's going to turn out to be great, and it did. And I would do it again. I would have done it again on that show, regardless of that memo. When they fired me, they fired me.
Well, it's interesting too, because when you're a regular DP on a series, I always wonder if, to a degree, you might have more of a creative influence over the course of the series than any given director, unless you're on a show that has only 1 or 2 directors. But shows where there are guest directors, they're coming in, but what the show looks like.
Yeah, look, some shows may not have a look, but they all have maybe a lensing style, right? It could be we do everything with long lenses. We all handheld. We shake the camera. On Fargo, we don't do handheld. So you can't come in there and say, oh, I want to make this whole sequence handheld. It's not going to happen. We're not going to do it. So, most directors understand that. Some come in sometimes and day one, they're like, put up the 150 mil. And you're like, we don't even have one. On Fargo, our longest lens used to be a 40. It was
wow.
It was like 27 and 40 were the kind of the wheelhouse for the show. And so a long lens, like a 150 or something, that would be like some really strong voyeuristic perspective, at that level, where some shows live on a 150 because that's the look of the show. So yes, directors need to come in and respect that. And now with shows having such visual strength, a Mr. Robot or something like that, where they're using these visuals for strong storytelling. Like if they were to shoot an episode of Mr. Robot that was conventional lensing and conventional coverage, the audience would go berserk. They would be like, what the hell
You'd be waiting
happened?
for the weird payoff at the end. You'd be waiting to find out that the whole episode took place in somebody's mind.
Right. It took place in a sitcom or something. They would be like, they would go berserk. And that, again, 25 years ago really didn't exist. But today, I think your podcasts like yours do so well and exist because of the sophistication of your listeners about how they feel about cinematography and visuals and storytelling. And sometimes I think a lot of people who call them cinematographers out there, they're probably directors.
We're definitely going to get into that because I think that that's also, an important thing because, probably a lot of our listeners are either on the fence about being a DP or a director or, they're interested in both or whatever if they're not already working. But I kind of want to go way, way, way back. You talked about being a camera assistant, but I sort of want to know, when did it first occur to you that this was a career path that you could follow? I mean, had you gone to film school or did you?
I hadn't gone to film school. I knew I liked photography and I knew that I was unemployable and I knew that I couldn't work in a normal industry. And the first day when I showed up on the set, what really attracted me was there was like a circus environment and I knew I had found my home. But the defining moment, I think, was I started loading the film for the job. I became the film loader. Those were the film days. And I was at home at my house. I lived at home and I was practicing loading film in a changing bag on my parents' kitchen table. And I told my parents, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Oh, wow.
Based on the overall feeling I had about the craziness, I just loved every bit of it. I loved it.
How did you find yourself on this? I mean, like, you don't randomly end up on a film crew. How did you end up on that crew?
Now, my father had a custom car shop, and he was working on these producers. They had this big truck. They were having a big window installed in the side of their truck with this big door, so they could do scenes in front of like Mann's Chinese Theater without paying a permit fee. So it was like Bowfinger, right? It was a little bit of like Bowfinger. It was like they literally like we would drive up and they would put the camera. And they would open up and there'd be a piece of glass, like two-way glass maybe. I forgot what it was. And then they would have the actors in front of Mann's Chinese Theater and doing a scene and we wouldn't pay the permit fee.
That's so funny.
I guess in those days, licensing things wasn't so important, I suppose. And so they were getting this work done. I happened to be visiting my father's business the day they were picking up the truck. And my dad had been telling me about these guys for a while because their truck was there for a while. And I kept saying, I grew up in LA, in Los Angeles. He kept telling me about them and maybe I should talk to them. I'm like, no, they're too low budget. I didn't even know what that meant. When you grow up in LA,
yeah.
you see these big studio films, right? And then, especially in those days, because those days there was studio films and there was B films, like a Roger Corman film, like a bad Roger Corman film. And there was nothing really in between. So I'm just like, these guys are low budget, and I didn't even know what that meant. So the day they were picking it up, I was there. My dad introduced me to the producer, and they said they're looking for someone to drive the truck. And I said, when does it start? They said tomorrow at 5:30 in the morning. Now, I was a bit of a surf bum fuck up in those days, and the fact that I said yes, I will wake up at 5:30 in the morning and go pick up your truck and drive it to the set was a miracle because I did not have a great track record of waking up in those days when I was 20 years old. If the surf was 3 to 4, I was going to blow it off and go surfing. But somehow I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, got the truck. The first set was Hollywood and Highland. There was a hotel there called Hollywood Terrace Hotel. It's not there anymore. And it was 7:30 in the morning and I had to back it into this alley and I stopped traffic, backed the truck up, opened the door, and then the circus started. And literally that was the first kernel. And I'm just like, holy shit, this is crazy. And it was like just people bringing equipment out, people walking by with costumes, like those kind of actor type people walking around. And then we started shooting. And I called my best friend at the time and I said, I'll get you a job. You got to come down here. He came down. I got him a job and we spent the next 4 months learning how to make films. He's still in the business. I'm still in the business. A lot of people probably have that story of that era about just these low budget films that people just bled the producers, and it was like about a paycheck. I mean, we used to have to line up every Friday to get paid from these guys. And we'd have to go like a big line and we'd go in the office and they would start asking us questions like, why do you think you earn this money and all this stuff? And,
oh, really?
We would drink beer the whole time. It was a different, very romantic time in my career. I loved every minute of every situation of every low budget fucked up job I ever did in my life.
I worked a job once. It was Bloodsport 2. I don't care who knows. And I was the assistant makeup artist on it, and we were shooting in Thailand, and I'd never been out of the country. And the director was this guy named Alan Merez, and my rate was $400 a week. So if you have a time machine and you want to hire me in 1995, that's how much you can get me for. And so we're there, and the way to get paid was you had to like go to the hotel bar and just run into Alan and say like, "Hey, Alan, I haven't been paid this week." And he's like, how much you get? And then you tell him, $400 a week plus whatever it was, $10 a day per diem. And he would pull this giant wad of cash out of his pocket. And then he'd be like, "Can you just write down on this napkin that I gave you this money?" Every week of that shoot, I had to like randomly run, and every crew member had to just randomly run into the director in the bar and say like, and he would literally just pay you in cash every week. It was super weird.
But you had fun, right?
It was a blast, and the lead was a guy named Daniel Bernhardt, who you see Daniel Bernhardt in like every Keanu Reeves movie with a giant fight scene. Daniel is one of the people he's either beating up or getting beat up, and he was the lead, and he was wonderful. The movie was kind of a clusterfuck, but it was the first crew walkout I ever participated in. Lots of fun like that. Yeah. Actually, the last crew walkout, I've never been on a crew walkout since then, led by the DP Jacques Heitgen, who was not having it.
Jacques. I know him well. That was. Look, it's funny because in those days they used to travel everybody like that. The whole crew was captive in a hotel, and all kinds of mischievous things were happening. And today, because all these cities now have crew, only heads of departments really travel. And at the end of the day, people go home to their families, and some people go to a hotel. Well, in those days, everybody was in a hotel, partying, drinking.
That's what they were all like.
Being losing their infidelity, all kinds of things. So again, those were very romantic times for me. I loved every second of it, and believe it or not, I think those times informed me for who I am today. I urge people again all the time to look. That's where you want to make mistakes, man. You're shooting these no budget projects, man. Put it out there on the line, and just like. If you go too far on those or whatever, who cares? I mean, but by the time you get to the more of the big time, you're ready to take those risks. You're totally prepared. So I mean, I've always done that, maybe stupidly. I wish maybe my career would be better along if I was more conservative earlier on. I don't know. I just don't have it in me.
Well, and I mean, I think that your career ends up being an expression of who you are. So, I mean, like the stuff you do is bold, and you got there by being that way. Now, was it on that first film that you started going like, ooh, cinematography, that's a thing I could do? Or when did that seed kind of plant itself in your head?
Yeah, well, there was a guy named Peter Paulian who was the Persian DP, and it was funny because he wasn't exactly the guy that you want the model DP. He wore this kind of pantsuit thing, and he had this great haircut. He smoked a pipe. I think he had like an ascot or something. He'd always talk in terms of big light. Give me one big light over there, one small light over there, and I'm like, okay. And so basically, I got into the camera department. I was naturally attracted to cameras. Like, I think the same reason why anybody would be attracted to a camera. I was just attracted to that. And so I bought my first still camera, a Nikon FE2. I remember my dad took me down to the photo shop, and I paid $240 for the body and another $85 for the lens, and it was brand new. And he thought that was a huge commitment. And I was just like, I need to do this. And then I started taking pictures. And believe me, those, and really making mistakes. Like, it's, when you first start taking pictures, you think every picture is like an amazing picture. And then you get it home. In those days, when you have 36 frames and you get it home, and you're lucky if one picture is actually usable, and they're all terrible. So that kind of sparked that. And then I became a pretty successful camera assistant working with a lot of great cinematographers. And then I naturally kind of knew, like, look, I want to become a DP. But in those days, becoming a DP was different than today. And in those days, DPs were a lot older. You worked as a loader, as a first assistant, as an operator, and then you became a DP. That was kind of the natural thing. Yeah, I guess people would come out of film school, but film schools in those days were much smaller and much harder to get into than today. So I was an assistant, a focus puller for 14 years. And in that 14 years, I was building my reel. And then one day I just said, I have to stop assisting, and I became a DP. That's a whole nother story in itself.
So for that whole time, were you like off shooting smaller projects, short films, music videos and stuff?
Yeah, I pretty much started shooting small shorts and spec commercials as soon as I humanly could. And believe me, they're bad. And I started, but I got to tell you, and I tell people this all the time, reels are like stepping stones. It's like, and normally when you're shooting shorts early on in your career, like the storytelling and the content's terrible. Like the writing's terrible. The production design doesn't exist. The actors are not great. But if I get another job from that job, that gets me one step closer to my goal. Yeah. And so I just kept doing that, and I kept kind of like using all these as stepping stones. And again, every job, just like today, I have the same philosophy. Every single job needs to be better than the last one. Every single project needs to resonate. It really needs to be this artistic statement that I want to put out today. Every single job, and every project I do is different. I use different lenses. I use all kinds of different things. Every script talks to me differently and means that I have to find a way to tell that story.
Well, I want to know too, because I feel like you have a really, your lighting is just, inspired. Everything of yours that I've watched, just the lighting really pops. And given that you didn't go to film school and that you were working in the camera department, when and how did you go about picking up your not proficiency, but your mastery of lighting?
I've always been attracted to art and art museums. It was probably art first and then photography second. I'm a huge fan of Rembrandt, and I think Rembrandt had it down when it comes to emotional portraits. I think, I've studied that quite a bit, and I'm a big believer in single light sources. So if you talk to any gaffer I worked with, they'll tell you, I'm pretty crazy about it. Like, I like doing as much as I can with one light and taking the light off that, refracting off that, or whatever it is, the way the light falls. And I do entire scenes without moving that single light. But the light's got to be in the right position, right? It's got to be in one great position, and then you build the scene off that axis. But to me, that's like a Rembrandt. A great Rembrandt there's a single source of light that's coming in, lighting their face, hitting a white table, sending a bounce up to the back, giving the little relief to give it dimension. I'm not a big into backlight. I think backlight is something that is there because it has to be there. Backlight normally is to separate the subject from the background. I mean, it's to give it three dimension. It's dimensionality. And because if you don't have some separation, then the people will blend into the walls, or there's no pop. I prefer to pick the right background and then separate with the foreground, background, lighting, and density. And I just think that that's better. When I first started in the business, key backfill were the terms. And like every
3-point lighting, straight old 3-point lighting.
That's how it was. That's how people did it. I mean, not everybody, but that was what they taught. Key backfill. Yeah. So when you were constructing a scene, every angle was backlit. I never understood that. I'm just like, how can that be? And to me, if I do a single source light and I could do the entire scene without moving that single source light, it's naturally going to fall in place. It's going to look great. It's going to work. The audience is going to understand. And I think there's a boldness to it. There's and it forces you to be bold because it forces you to utilize that source in creative ways. So versus some DPs, like they will light a angle and then they'll like clear everything out, set up the shot, set up the next angle, bring in the lights, shoot it, clear it out, set up the camera, bring all the lights in. And I never understood that because that's a very forced thing. If I think about a scene like a painting, even though a painting is one image, if you were to shoot a scene of Rembrandt painting one of his suitors and you were to shoot more angles of it, the light wouldn't change and it would probably look incredible. That's just how I've always felt. I don't know why I feel that way. That's just how I feel that way. And I drive gaffers crazy until they understand me because I'll just say, why don't we just take a 18K and stick it 40 feet off to the very back wall of the stage and bring the light in through the window of the set and see what happens. And then now we're shooting the scene and we're not thinking about the lighting, yet the lighting is quite beautiful. And the actors are in an environment where pace-wise, we're not stopping to relight. The director is able to achieve more shots.
Yeah, that was my question too.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, I don't know if creating a good single source lighting plot, if executing that idea might take a little longer. I don't know. It sounds like it wouldn't take longer, but it just sounds like, once you're lit, then you can move.
Yeah.
I mean, but does it restrict how much you can move around in that space?
No. It's actually quite the opposite for me. Backlight restricts you from moving the camera. Okay.
Whoa.
When
You're blowing my mind at everything you say is blowing my mind. This is awesome.
No, if every shot is backlit, good luck coming off axis. Where if you watch a show like Legion, the camera is off axis all day long. So if I had just natural backlight, as soon as I came around, I'm in front light and it's over. You nailed it though. Finding the perfect angle to support an entire scene with one light could sometimes take a little longer. So sometimes you're nuancing that one light. God forbid you have to hang that one light. If you have to hang that light, that's a whole nother level of time. Yeah, it's a thought process. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like the minute it works, it works. And the minute it doesn't work, it fails, which is right exactly where I want to be. I want to be right there. and people tell me all the time, it's like, that's not going to work. I'm like, let me fail. And people have heard me say this before. I'm just like, please let me fail. I don't know. Maybe I understand that no one does this for whatever reason, but I want to try it. I think it's going to work. And
I think let me fail is great advice anyway to anyone who wants to like stick their neck out and do something a little differently and getting resistance. It's like, it's sort of like saying, I'll take the responsibility for this if it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that I hope today that people are hiring me for that, I mean, I think some people think they are, but some people are like, well, I didn't know that you were going to do that. I don't get much of that, but I don't know. I just think that the visualists that your listeners respond to are doing that. They really are, and they're challenging themselves, and that's why people are responding to their visuals. I urge everybody to work that way. Again, I understand that not every project is going to support that, and I think that everybody could do it in little ways to always kind of keep nudging at it, and if they really want to keep pushing boundaries and find that place on each show where how far you can push. And I think at the end of the day, if you go home and you're questioning yourself and going, man, maybe I pushed it too far this day, that's awesome. That I love that. Again, not everybody wants to work that way. I personally love working that way.
I mean, is there a process though when you're dealing with a director, for instance, where you kind of have to sell them on doing it like this, because obviously it's going to some degree, it's going to dictate the coverage? No, or is it? I mean,
all the time. I mean, again, I have to say that I've been very fortunate that I've been able to prove myself early. And I mean, a lot of times some directors they don't come in with anything that heavy. So they're going to appreciate that you have a thought like that. But definitely if someone comes in and says, this may be too much, or the lighting maybe is too bold, or do you think we should back it off a little bit? That's cool. That's a collaborative moment, and it's like, okay, you pushed it too far. You haven't shot it. They're thinking maybe they don't feel it emotionally for the scene. You back it off, you alter it, you change it. Maybe you put it in the middle. That's collaborative. That's again, everything that I want to collaborate with people. I want to collaborate with everybody on the set personally. And so, if someone brings an idea that is just undeniable, to me, the idea that I don't want to hear is the way that they did it on Mission Impossible 1. I don't want to hear that idea. I want to hear a new idea.
Yeah. So we only have a few more minutes, but I wanted to talk to you about, you haven't fully moved into directing because you still DP. You haven't left the DP world, but you did move into directing some time ago. And we actually talked to Eric Messerschmidt, who shot one of your episodes.
The finale. He shot me a few times. Yeah.
I'm always interested in people who move from cinematography to directing, and was moving to directing always in the plan, or was it something that kind of developed as you worked on TV and stuff, and you got to know the visual language of those shows?
I've always thought about it, but I'm a realist in a lot of ways, even though I sound like I'm like out of my mind. I'm always very calculated on my career path and the reality of what I am doing and what I can achieve. So on that show, Pretty Little Liars, they offered me in the first season to direct an episode of the second season, and
you were like, all view cam. The whole episode would be all view cams.
Yeah. I probably didn't go that. Well, I went pretty deep, but that's how I got into DGA. That was my first episodic directing job, and I told my wife before that I wasn't ready yet because I was just, again, I hadn't spent much time in television. I was learning, and I didn't feel like I had all the skills, like listening to dialogue. I mean, as DPs, sometimes you don't even listen to the dialogue. So I spent a couple years, I do it now for anything I shoot. I listen, I have the headphones on, and I trained myself to listen to the dialogue. So, because again, my first years of DPing, I didn't even have a headset on, and I was just, you're looking at the visuals 100%, and you're letting the director deal with the dialogue and all that. That's his job. And so I trained myself to listen to dialogue and be able to look at visuals and listen to dialogue and really put myself in that space. So I felt now I was ready. I did it. I think it was very successful. It was still one of the top viewed episodes. But I always knew that if I wanted to extend my directing of television, at least, I wanted to do it on the biggest dramas. I like drama, and I wanted to do it on the biggest shows with the best writing. And so I wasn't prepared to stay like there and direct 2 episodes a season or whatever. I left. I started working with Noah on Fargo and Legion, and then I started directing Legion. And then this year I directed 4 episodes of Fargo, which was amazing. And meanwhile, I directed my first feature film in between that time. And then, the momentum started just happening. And when you're the author of a show visually, and you know how the story is being told, and it definitely helps you as a director that you have that strength, versus coming into another show and adopting their visuals and their storytelling techniques, which I've done as well. I've done that. I've had to do that as well. But now, there's been a lot of really great things that have happened actually in the pandemic for me on the directing front. I will probably be directing a lot more than shooting in the near future. Again, it's a natural progression. I'm ready to do that mentally, emotionally. I think I've done enough work where people have seen what I'm about. And going back to maybe one of your early questions, I guess I've always wanted to tell stories, and I just didn't know it.
I actually think that that's a really great place to leave it. If people want to check out your work online, obviously they can go to Hulu, they can watch Legion there, they can watch Fargo there. But is there any place where people can see your work? Do you have a website or Instagram or something where people can check your stuff out?
Instagram, Dana _ Gonzales _ ASC is the Instagram. I have a website that I don't really update that often, but it's there, which is just danagonzales.com. My Instagram is a combination of my life, my family, my art. So it's not the most curated far. Like some people have just a incredibly beautiful curated Instagram. That's fine. And mine is like I don't mind celebrating family and art because I have a strong message that you can have a family and you could create art and you could be in this business and there's room for all of it. And, so it doesn't have to be a sacrifice and you have to be lonely and miserable, and so.
I could learn a lot from that.
No, I'm very fortunate. My daughter is a cinematographer, Bella Gonzales. Wow. She went to AFI. She's a great cinematographer. My youngest, Paloma, is about to go to film school as a director. My wife teaches dance, so it's we're very kind of live in a very art bubble world, and and just like again my life kind of revolves around them, and they've given me the wings to do what I do, and I'm able to approach every project with a very 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 clear mind because of that, and I wish that on everybody.
Well, Dana, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
So that was Dana Gonzales. Hey, thank you so much for being on the show. That was so much fun. I can't wait to see what you're doing next.
Yeah, and everybody go watch some Fargo.
Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't caught up on Fargo, definitely go check it out. It's a really smart, very, I want to say fun, but it's a dark, fun series. It is
a fun series. It's
dark.
I mean, it's
and
like
fun.
it's a dark, fun crime show. I love what they do.
In the same sort of vibe that the original Fargo was. I mean, it's like it really doesn't connect to the feature Fargo, but it is in that same universe and it's in that same world and it's got the same vibes, and that's what's so fun about it.
The first season of Fargo did have a connection to the movie. I don't know if you remember it.
It does have a connection to the movie, but I would say that it's not really based around that movie. It's not.
No, I agree. But it did have a very tangential connection, but they were like really making sure. And I was through the whole first season, I was like, so is this cop supposed to be the child of Frances McDormand, who she was pregnant with in the original, or what's going on here? And the answer was no. But I did like the connection they made with the money.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that was nice too. Okay.
You know what time it is now.
Oh, I do know what time it is, because this is when I have to go to work. It's time to pay the bills.
All right. Who is our sponsor today? Who's our fine sponsor?
We got to thank the people over at Aperture who's helping make this show possible. And I'd like to highlight one of their products that doesn't get a lot of attention, and that's actually their light kits. They make these 2-bank and 3-bank light kits that come in a big sort of Pelican style case. It's actually from another company, but it's a wonderful case. Actually, it's an SKB case, if I'm not mistaken. And that case has 2 or 3 of their Aperture 120D Mark II lights inside. And for those of you out there who understand and recognize the power of having one of those lights, imagine having 2 or 3 in a case that's easy to roll around. They cost pretty much the same price of buying the lights separately, just sort of together. Maybe slightly more because they also include some stands and some other stuff. But they've been so popular lately that we actually don't have them on our website. And we actually scored some recently, and we kind of reserve them in our shop for people who call for it. So here's the little pro insider tip. You will see them back ordered on the Aperture website. You'll see them back ordered everywhere. These things are always in demand. But if you want them, if you call Hot Rod Cameras and say, hey, I heard that you guys have these Aperture 120D kits in stock, these multi-light kits, find out what we've got, because we've kind of not been putting it out there, because it seems like the moment we put it out there, boom, they're sold out. And we've been trying to do something a little extra for the local clients who need these things sometimes on very short notice. It's like, oh my God, my kit's not available and I got to go shoot an interview. And here's sort of like all the stuff in one case minus like sandbags, and they can immediately go and rock and roll. So, you can go to the Aperture website and check out the LS120D2 kits, and you can see all about them. But call Hot Rod Cameras and we can hook you up if you're interested.
Wow, yeah, definitely do that. And when you do that, demand a Hot Rod t-shirt.
Ooh, we're running low on shirts, actually. I just found out the other day that very few shirts, we're down to the V-neck variety. So we have men's and women's and V-neck varieties. But yes, the traditional sort of like t-shirt sold out. And we've had several people lately, some people from Toronto came in and picked some up the other day. All right, Ben. So before we get into the short ends, I think we should do a little bit of fan mail. We got a nice message that came in via Instagram. I'm going to say thank you in advance to Robert. This is what Robert says. Hey there. I'm not sure if Ben or Ilya directly run this account. We sometimes do. But I just wanted to say you guys are absolutely fantastic. And I've been devouring your podcast over the past 2 weeks. Wednesday is quickly becoming my favorite day of the week. Keep up the great work, you guys. Cheers. Thanks, Robert. Robert. That was super awesome, and I totally just followed you back now. So the cinematography.
Robert, what's his Instagram handle?
It's RJ Cohen _. So thank you, Robert. That's super cool.
I will also follow Robert.
And now, short ends.
All right, so Ben, it's time. It's time for short ends. You got a short end this week?
I do have a short end, and it's not directly film related, but it is totally film related, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So for years, I have been using the Notes app, the very popular Notes app, Evernote.
Okay.
And Evernote a few years ago, understandably, I understand they got to make their money, and they're a great company, and I have no beef with Evernote, but they changed their policy so you could have it on there's basically 2 tiers. There's a free tier and a pro tier. The free tier you can have on 2 machines and you can share infinite number of notes, blah, blah, blah. The pro tier, you can put it on all your machines and it does a lot more stuff, but it's like $80 a year. And I was like, $80 a year is just, it's too much for a notes app. You know, there's Apple Notes, which is free on iPhones, and I'm sure that there's the equivalent on Android, whatever. But I was like, I need a notes app. Like, I want a notes app that can sync on all my devices. I recently got an iPad, so I wanted to have that on my iPad, my desktop computer, my laptop, my phone, and even my watch, if possible, right? Evernote doesn't have a watch app, and I found an app called Bear, which is also a subscription service, but it's like $15 a year. And it syncs onto everything, which is cool. And I was actually able to take every notebook I ever made in Evernote and export it in a format that they do. It maybe took me a half an hour. And I've been using Evernote for over 10 years. It took me about a half an hour to export every single note in every single notebook and bring them all into Bear. They're basically the same. They don't call them notebooks. They organize by hashtags, but it looks exactly the same as a notebook. For all intents and purposes, it's exactly the same as a notebook. And it does have a watch app. And the watch app is possibly my favorite part of it, because how often are you like walking around and you have a sudden brainstorm for a thing, whatever that thing is? For me, it might be a line of dialogue in a script I'm working on, or a casting idea, or it could be anything, literally anything. So they have a watch app. And if you have the Apple Watch, you launch the watch app, you tap on make new note, and it uses speech to text, just like you're sending a text on your watch. And you can also, there also is a keyboard if you want to use it, which I find onerous and I don't like it, but I use speech to text. And then like, as soon as you do it, if you're holding your iPad, boom, it pops right up. The note pops up on your iPad, on your desktop, wherever you have Bear Notes. It syncs so quickly. It has a bunch of different themes. I went with one that was just kind of darkish looking because it was easier on the eyes. And I use notes apps for all kinds of stuff, but when I'm working on a project of any kind, I always will create a notebook, or in this case, a hashtag now, where every note, every meeting, everything gets kind of stored there. So I have access to it. Again, if I'm on my phone, if I'm on my iPad, if I'm at home, wherever the hell I am, I can access all of that information. I usually, at the beginning of a meeting, will even like, it's just a weird habit of mine, I'll take a picture on my phone of some inane thing in the room or something, just so I can, when I look at that note, I'll remember that day. And it enables you to embed photos. And in fact, when I brought the stuff over from Evernote, it brought all the embedded photos exactly the way they were. So anyway, so that is it's a for real obsession. Like, I've been very excited to find a notes app that I thought worked really well, really seamlessly. And, $15 a year, I think, is a fair price to pay for something like that, because I don't use it every single day of my life.
Compared to Evernote, that sounds incredible. That sounds like huge value.
Yeah,
super cool.
It's pretty good. My guess is someone listening to this is like, wow, I love Evernote, but I wish I could have it on more than one thing and didn't have to pay that much per year.
Yeah. Well, nice. Sounds like something very useful. I am not one of those note people. I write things on paper, and yes, then I type it into a computer later. And so I'm super old school, and I have no fancy watch. So yeah, that's how it is for me.
I gotta say, like, I love the Apple Watch, and it's great for health tracking, and that's probably what I do 90% with it. But I'm always I feel like it is underserved. There aren't enough apps for like productivity and practical stuff on there. So when I find one that I think is awesome, and I really do feel like this is an awesome thing, because again, how often are you just walking around and you suddenly have a brainstorm, or you're stuck in traffic and you have an idea and you don't want to like pull your phone out, or you don't want to pull out a pencil and paper and write it. You just want to be able to record it quickly. It's the fastest way to do it that I've ever seen.
Nice. Hey, my short end this week actually is something that just happened today. So there's a good chance that our listeners haven't heard about this. Wait, is it
the Oscars? Because the Oscars just happened today.
Nope, not that.
Something else happened today? Right.
Probably one of our favorite Australian camera manufacturers, Blackmagic, actually has released a new firmware for their very popular 6K, 4K, and 6K Pro line of pocket cameras. And basically what it does is...
So what you're saying is suck it 12K users. Sorry, go on.
No, not necessarily. There is actually something in there for Blackmagic 12K users as well. But really it's doing is it upgrades the color science to what they call Generation 5, which is kind of a big deal. And they have a long list of other improvements, including changing the histogram from just luminance to now RGB, so you can see what all of your channels are doing, red, green, and blue. It also adds an indicator to find out if your channels are clipping, because as you may or may not know, if you've got a camera and something is very bright in your scene, certain channels may clip before others, and now you have a way to identify that and adjust your exposure accordingly. There's also a false color guide, LCD screen calibration settings, improves the autofocus that's there, because of course the autofocus that exists in these cameras has, let's just say, there was always room for improvement, so improvement is happening.
That's diplomatic.
Yes, there's also improved focus peaking visibility and fixes importing LUTs, and there's a bunch of other sort of like stability and general sort of QC sort of things going on. We will put a link to the firmware on the show notes at camnoir.com. So if you go to this episode and go through the show notes, there will be a link to the Blackmagic website where you can see all the very, very long list of fixes. And there is there's a Blackmagic RAW 2.0 spec that is now going to be unlocked inside the Ursa Mini Pro 12K. I don't know exactly what that does. It's so new, I haven't gotten into it, but there's a bunch of bug fixes and other things, and some other bits of support for products like Blackmagic RAW coming from other cameras like the Nikon cameras and that sort of thing. So general performance and stability improvements. So if you are a Blackmagic camera user, and I know that there are a bunch of people out there because it is one of the best bang for buck camera systems out there, go to the Hot Rod, sorry, not the Hot Rod. Well, you can buy all your stuff at Hot Rod Cameras, but I was going to say, you go to the Cam Noir, the Cinepod website, and there'll be a link in the show notes to take you straight to the Blackmagic page where you can download that and upgrade your camera.
Man, Blackmagic, I have to say, like, most improved camera company over a relatively short period of time. I still remember seeing their first 2.5K production camera and the 4K camera. And
do you remember the full size Ursa camera?
I do remember that was like practically the size of the Dalsa Origin. That was a big ass camera. But then they came out with the Mini, and I was like, oh, the Mini is like the size of a normal camera, and that's what everyone liked, of course. Yeah,
Blackmagic is definitely, they definitely get some awards for most improved. They start off one way, and then through iterations, they figure out exactly where they need to be going. And the current crop of cameras they're making are the best cameras they've ever made, by far.
I'm curious, are there any, there must be like some TV shows or movies that have been filmed on it that are like out and you can see them.
There definitely are. Off the top of my head, I can't think of many, but I do know, like South by, there was a list of, and Sundance, there's different sort of festivals that list which cameras were used for different movies, and Blackmagic is always quite popular. I recall back in the day that Mythbusters, I know you were a fan of that show, they shot a lot of Mythbusters on Blackmagic cameras. I don't know.
They did.
Yeah, and those were some of the earlier cameras as well too. So,
well, yeah, because like Mythbusters has been off the air for probably close to 10 years now.
And there's quite a bit of stuff that was shot with the original Blackmagic pocket camera to varying degrees and results. I don't want to call out some things that don't look particularly good, but that was actually a pretty impressive 16mm camera in a time when 16mm digital cameras didn't have a lot of options. Your one choice, of course, really was digital Bolex, but digital Bolex and original pocket camera, cinema camera, those were the two options. And
I wasn't a big fan of that camera, and we shot an episode of 20 Seconds to Live on their first 4K camera. Mm-hmm. And I thought the image looked great, but that camera needed a lot of light. And I know that they've fixed that problem since then. But for us doing a nighttime scene, I know George needed to really light up the world, because I want to say it was like 300 ISO or something like that. So not bad if you're doing an exterior or whatever, or you're shooting an interview, or it's, pretty standard stuff. But if you're doing something cinematic and dark, it's a lot harder to light that up. But they've definitely addressed those kinds of issues, and their sensors are way better now.
And they have 3 cameras, of course, that are Netflix approved, which is cool. They have the Blackmagic Ursa Mini 4.6K, and then the Ursa Mini Pro 4.6K G2. I know that both of those are in there. And of course, they shot part of The Great, actually. John Brawley, friend of the show, he used some Blackmagic cameras on The Great.
Oh, sweet.
So I know I think it was Arri was one cameras, and I think that some of the other cameras were Blackmagic, and I know that he's a big fan. He uses them on a lot of things.
I mean, from the beginning, I think the only camera the only one they ever made that I wasn't wild about the look of it was the first pocket camera. But like all of the cameras got a great look. I remember you showing me stuff off of the 2.5K original, and you were like, you're not going to want to shoot in HD after you see this. And I looked at it and I was like, I thought it looked really great. They've only gotten better, but I mean, it's it's a pretty fascinating company how they've kind of moved into the camera space, moved into the editing space. They're slowly taking over a certain sector of how stuff gets made, especially independent stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do know that they're being tested for big network shows as well, too, because I know I set up a test for them not that long ago. And I know that people are paying really close attention to their latest and greatest that they've come out with, which is all really good stuff. So
cool. Well, I think that wraps us up. Congratulations again to Best Cinematography Academy Award winner Eric Messerschmidt. And Ilya, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me over at Hot Red Cameras. HotRedCameras.com is the official website. I'm there usually Monday through Friday and generally chatting with people about what kind of gear they need, helping people plan out studio builds or in-house corporate productions, that sort of stuff. I do an awful lot of that. I have a team of 12 now, I can't believe. But yeah, 12 people
Sweet.
Who also are highly technically competent and very friendly and can also help with all those sorts of things if I'm not around. But yeah, find me over at Hot Red Cameras. And if you do mention the show, we've got a t-shirt for you, at least for a little bit longer. We have a few t-shirts
probably
left.
A V-neck. Let's be honest. It'll probably be a V-neck.
I mean, like
I'm not. There's nothing wrong with V-neck. It's just some people pull off a V-neck. I don't wear a V-neck. I feel like some people make it work and some people don't.
All right, Ben, where can people find you?
There's definitely, like in a Seinfeldian kind of a sense, there's definitely V-neck people and non-V-neck people. What do you call it? Round neck? I don't know what you call it. Crew neck?
You know what? Yeah, I just say standard neck maybe. I don't know, but
yeah.
I think that
I am not a V-neck person for sure,
Oh,
but
okay.
There are people who V-neck just they put it on and it just lights them up like a Christmas tree.
I think you could be a V-neck person. I've never seen you in a V-neck, but I think you could pull it off.
Maybe I'll have to test those waters maybe.
Where can people find you? Yeah, where are you, Ben?
Please find me at benrockonline.com. You'll find all my social media stuff. I think a bunch of people from the show have been adding me on the social media, and I always appreciate it. And that's probably the best place to find me. You can find me on Twitter at Neptune Salad, and I'm on Instagram at Benjamin_Rock because I didn't really think that Instagram thing was going to take off.
It hasn't. Not really. So.
Yeah, and you can find me at TikTok, not at all because I don't really use TikTok.
Oh yeah, Snapchat either? No, not
Snapchat. I feel like Snapchat was designed to confuse anyone over millennial age.
You're right. Okay, so Ben, let's thank some people. Who should we be thanking?
Number one, Alana Cody, without whom the show would not be happening on the pace and level, and she's constantly lining up just these amazing cinematographers. I was so proud of how many of the best cinematography nominees we had interviewed on the show, and that's a direct reflection on the hard work of Alana Cody and how much she cares about what she's doing. We should also thank Ben Katz, who this week you and I did not make his life very easy, but he's our editor. He's an amazing editor, and he makes us sound like not imbeciles sometimes, to the best of his ability. Given the materials, the imbecilic material we give him, he makes us sound less imbecilic.
Well, it doesn't matter. Sometimes there's no hope for us. I certainly felt like it tonight. Yeah.
yeah. You can't polish a turd. And
actually, on Mythbusters, they proved you can.
That's true. There was an episode about polishing a turd. I loved Mythbusters so much.
Pretty good episode. Yeah.
Rest in peace, Grant Imahara. And lastly, we should thank Kezal Trakshi, who is most likely not listening to this episode. Although sometimes he does. You never know.
No, but I appreciate that strangers are now trolling him about not listening, which is great. So,
they should. Yeah, anyone who knows Kez should give him shit about not listening to the show. Because, we feature his music and we talk him up. And
we
honestly,
just say thank you. Maybe
we hold him in the highest esteem. So
very high regard over here, for sure. All right. So I think that just about does it for this week. So thank you so much for listening.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.